Well, hello. Here we are again, and I'm going to deliver my opinion about Bigfoot. Oh my. I'll tell you, I'm really surprised that there's been so much hostility directed towards me because I have a different opinion about Bigfoot. I had no idea that I could stir people up so much. But none of that really has made much of a difference whatsoever. And in fact, it's like we always say, don't sweat the small stuff, right? So let's get on with it. I'm actually going to tell you what I think, and I don't mean to diminish or disparage anybody else. I'm just telling you what I think after really a long time 30 years. 30 years I've been trying to figure it out. So here we go. We're going to start with Einstein. Why are we going to start with Einstein? He's key to the whole understanding of what's going on with Bigfoot, in my opinion. Because Einstein, and this is the main argument I'm going to make here for the first part, solved the unified field theory problem and hid the answer in plain sight. And I'm going to show you how he did that and what it is and why it is probably right. So, this is important for understanding Bigfoot later. This is a key principle in physics that you need to understand about this place we live. So, let us go on. Einstein made three particular comments I wish to highlight about the unified field theory. One was, if a 10-year-old doesn't understand it, you're wrong. Another was, quantum mechanics isn't wrong, it is incomplete. And the third was, God does not play dice. So these are three statements Einstein made regarding the unified field theory, theoretically. One of the last papers Einstein published in 1934-35 was all about showing that quantum mechanics was incomplete. And it was a thought experiment conducted by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, kind of a famous paper. But Einstein was definitely interested in showing us that quantum mechanics was incomplete. I'll show you what that means later. But first, we're going to jump to something that happened, which was a man named Dr. Salvatore Pais appeared online and gave different interviews in different places, and he worked for the U.S. Navy and now the U.S. Space Force. And he published 3 patents that really seem to be UFO related, just judging from looking at them. But his name directly translates to Savior of the Nation. And I feel that Dr. Pais is a psyop from within our government, from within our military, delivering to us, the civilians of America in particular, revolutionary technology. I think this is all a big setup and a psyop, and that he has been given the role of quote unquote inventor of these things, although they got invented a long time ago, which is what I'm going to talk about now. Dr. Pais talks about the superforce and mentions how the superforce can be found in Einstein's field equations and in Dirac's equations. He also mentions that the superforce is the Planck force. He mentions several other aspects about the superforce. I recognize the description of the superforce as a new name for an old thing. Tesla's cosmic ray. The luminiferous ether of the 19th century, the akasa of ancient Hindu Brahmins, and the Ta or Tamanawis of North American tribes. These aspects that he assigns to the superforce remind me of the aspects assigned to these other names for, I believe, the same exact energy. So, based on Dr. Pais's comments, I played with the Einstein field equations. I found that by multiplying the EFE by the inverse of the Einstein gravitational constant, that reveals the superforce. And it's just simple algebra on a macro scale, just dealing with the 50,000 foot view. And it leads to a different version of general relativity. And it creates different physics in this different version of general relativity. Here's the details of how, well, some details. To take you down in the weeds for a second, K is the Einstein gravitational constant, or kappa. Kappa is, and it's equal to 8 pi g over the speed of light to the fourth power, c to the fourth. It's approximately equal to 2.0766 times 10 to the minus 43 newtons. So it's a force. It's a force, and that is on the right side of the Einstein field equation next to the stress energy tensor. The Einstein field equation at the 50,000 foot view has the Einstein tensor G, the metric tensor, which is little g, and the cosmological constant, which is for the expansion or contraction of the universe, and the stress energy tensor, T, on the other side of the equation, multiplied by the Einstein gravitational constant, because gravity is thought to be part of the distribution of matter, energy, and momentum. On the right side of the equation, it's multiplied by that. Anyhow, I found that by multiplying both sides of the equation by 1 over k, to remove k from the right side and put it on the left side, and just multiply by the inverse of the Einstein gravitational constant, c to the fourth over 8 pi g, one gets the unified field theory. And it's so simple because you multiply by a constant. A 10-year-old can understand it. You're done, too. And why is this the unified field theory? Well, let me try to explain it to you and persuade you of what you're looking at now. This different form of relativity, obtained algebraically by one multiplication, has what I call the superforce, c to the fourth over 8 pi g. Let's talk about the Planck force and the Planck unit of force. The Planck length is the smallest possible length in our geometry of space-time. Below that distance we can't see. It is so small that beyond that the error is larger than the distance, and so we can't actually see what's past the Planck length. The Planck unit of force is c to the fourth over g. It's 1.21 times 10 to the 44 newtons. It's an incredibly strong force as opposed to gravity, which is an incredibly weak force. But the difference between c to the fourth over g and c to the fourth over 8 pi g, which is the Einsteinian gravitational constant inverted, is just 8 pi. So they're almost the same, although it seems that the superforce is slightly less strong than the Planck force, although I can see how Dr. Pais meant that, they're both c to the fourth over g. One's just times 8 pi, which I'm sure has something to do with relativity. Anyhow, here's what I'm talking about. Planck unit of force and the superforce, which is 1 over k. So you can see what Dr. Pais was getting at here. The superforce, more or less, is the Planck unit of force. Let's say it's so close, and they're made out of the same components, but refined a little bit. Now, what I theorize is that there's a thing known as the Schwinger effect, and that's when you get an electrical density of an electric field that is greater than 10 to the 33 watts per meter squared, which is commensurate with 10 to the 25 watts per meter cubed. And when you get a charge density that high, you actually make matter. Electrons come out of it, protons, neutrons. In other words, particles are actually created by a super strong electrical field or a super strong magnetic field. 10 to the 18 Tesla per meter squared, I believe, is the magnetic flux strength that will give you the same creation of matter. So at a certain point, there's something that's called quantum electrodynamic vacuum breakdown, or quantum electrodynamic breakdown, when you actually break through the back wall, the Planck length of the quantum vacuum. When you actually punch through the edge of the quantum vacuum and get to what's behind it. And what I'm saying is behind it is the superforce. Because when I look at this equation, as we're looking at it right now, how can c to the fourth over 8 pi g be outside of the Einstein tensor and the metric tensor? How can they be inside parentheses and c to the fourth over 8 pi g actually be outside of that, outside of the geometry of space-time? By being so small that it's below the Planck length. So I'm saying that the superforce is at or below the Planck length in terms of wavelength, because it's a standing wave and it's got a wavelength. And that lower boundary of that wavelength I've calculated by taking the speed of light at the Planck length. And what is the frequency of energy moving at the speed of light and at the Planck length with a wavelength of the Planck length? And it's 1.87 times 10 to the 37 megahertz. And that would be the frequency where each wavelength is at the Planck length at the speed of light. So I think the actual superforce wavelength is beneath that and beneath the Planck length and is actually faster than light. I think c to the fourth actually might literally be true. So what this gives us is this completes quantum mechanics, because c to the fourth over 8 pi g is where matter is created, then it is pushed into or somehow it feeds the quantum vacuum from the Planck length above. It gets into the quantum vacuum where all kinds of virtual particles and quantum mechanics takes place. And then finally we get matter, energy, and momentum in our universe on the other side of the equation, the stress energy tensor. So, in other words, this superforce is creating all matter in the world. It's pushing against the geometry of space-time, and it creates the distribution of matter, energy, and momentum in our world. And so we can see the life cycle of, say, an electron from the far left where it's created, and then the quantum vacuum that it travels through on its way to becoming solid matter or energy or momentum in our universe, which is where it winds up. And then it lives a full life cycle. Perhaps the electron falls apart one day or gets absorbed. In other words, we can now see the full, complete life cycle of the electron from creation to death. So let's talk about the superforce and Dr. Pais's hints about it. But so let me start at the top. It's faster than light. It's outside the boundary of space-time, in my humble opinion, because it's right at the Planck length, but it seems to be somehow beyond the Planck length. It's a standing wave. And why I would say it's a standing wave is because I'm a drummer. And when you have energy in a free, unbound place, it's going to synchronize. You're going to wind up with a standing wave if you have unbounded energy. That's my opinion. It's radiation, meaning it's like a radio wave. It's AC. It's alternating current. It's a transmission. It's a radio wave above the Schwinger limit. I'm saying the frequency is so high at 1.87 times 10 to the 37 minimum that is just at or above the Schwinger limit at all times, and it's constantly creating matter, energy, and momentum in this universe. Trillions of times a second. It's a high-frequency gravity wave. We know that gravity is a wave now thanks to the LIGO detector and the recent Nobel Prize awarded for proving that gravity exists. So we know that gravity is a wave, and the idea that Einstein initially advanced, that it's the curvature of space-time, is incorrect. I also say it has a wavelength at or below the Planck length. Here's where we get a little further. The superforce is consciousness. It's the merger of all 5 forces, the 4 physics forces, and consciousness. Because it is all consciousness, as well as creating all matter, energy, and momentum, it's God. It is the creator. It is a higher power that actually is creating this entire universe and those of us observing it. It creates all the observers and the consciousness in all things. Consciousness creates this world, and it's God's consciousness that creates this world. We live inside God's mind, literally. And this shared subconsciousness passes through all living creatures and everything in existence. C to the 4th over 8 pi g is actually all consciousness in every living thing. So Einstein's unified field theory changes general relativity to have a creator at the center of it, a higher power. God is creating everything, and God does not play dice. In this formulation of general relativity, God creates everything, including all us conscious creatures. Einstein's solution pulls general relativity away from the atheistic, materialistic, mechanistic physics of our era. We inherit the grand assumption of René Descartes, that the universe is a big soulless machine. Consciousness creates this world instead. God's consciousness, which is our subconscious, We do not have conscious control of our subconscious minds. We have subconscious minds and we share them with God, but we don't have conscious control of it. God does. So here's where I try to break it down again to reiterate this thing. C to the fourth over 8 pi g is God, a higher power. It's a non-local, high-frequency gravitational radiation standing wave beneath the Planck lake above the Schwinger limit. Then we have the geometry of space-time, which is the Einsteinian tensor, the metric tensor, and cosmological constant. The quantum vacuum in the real world above the Planck length. That's what that is. And then we actually have the actual distribution of matter, energy, and momentum above the Planck length over on the right side. So this is how the universe is created trillions and trillions of times a second, because if the frequency is 1.87 times 10 to the 37, that's like a trillion times a second, just shortening it. So I say this solution was hidden in plain sight, and it completes quantum mechanics. It shows how God does not play dice. It describes a faster than light wave below the Planck length, so it describes where everything is entangled with everything else. And it describes what happens when quantum electrodynamic breakdown reveals what's behind the quantum vacuum. It also shows the primary physics principle for how faster than light gravimetric motors work. In other words, your UFOs. Now, here's where I go Western and Eastern on you. Because the Western way, we do this with technology. We find the frequency, we generate that frequency, we connect to C to the fourth over 8 pi g, we achieve quantum electrodynamic breakdown, we reach behind the quantum vacuum. But if you do it purely with your mind, since C to the fourth over 8 pi g is all consciousness, your consciousness is part of it. It is your subconscious mind that you don't have control of. But you could control C to the fourth over 8 pi g by thinking about it if you were smart enough. And some people, I gather, do reach beyond our present level of consciousness. So, yes, the superforce radiation, this standing wave, think of it as a fabric of high frequency, faster than light gravity waves, and the distribution of all matter, energy, and consciousness and momentum is written upon this fabric by a creator. That is the shock. Einstein's changed general relativity does have the creator creating everything. So Einstein hid the unified field theory until the day that physics would have to acknowledge a creator, putting God at the center of general relativity. Well, physics is not quite there. Physics as we know it today assumes everything is just a soulless machine. Mechanist materialism combined with radical atheism, which started way back with René Descartes. Until we let go of the idea of a universe without a creator, the unified field theory remained hidden in plain sight. Einstein planted a seed that we would not understand until we grew up spiritually. So this this form of the relativity right here, the high frequency gravity wave of the superforce is subject to Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The low frequency gravity, regular gravity, we detected with the LIGO detector is the equal and opposite reaction to the high-frequency gravity that creates all matter, energy, and momentum and pushes it into this geometry of space-time. In other words, low-frequency gravity as we know it is the reactive force resulting from the creation of matter and energy, which is occurring trillions of times a second from the superforce. This is where gravity comes from. It is Newton's third law of motion reacting to matter and energy being pushed into this geometry of space-time from beneath the Planck length. Here's formally what I mentioned before. All 5 forces found in nature, including consciousness, which is a force, that also seems to be a rather radical idea, are merged in the superforce. I am not going to be able to test this theory experimentally right at the moment. I lack the means. But Silicon Valley will get there because Silicon Valley is in a race to get smaller and smaller technology. We're currently at 3 nanometers. We want to get smaller. We're going to reach the Planck length. Silicon Valley will reach the Planck length, and I speculate that our military has reached the Planck length a long time ago. Once our technology reaches the Planck length, we'll find out if everything I have just told you about is true or not, because I call it the edge effect. When you get as small as the Planck length and you touch this faster than light standing wave, suddenly you can move it faster than light. You can basically use that as the wave that you're moving inside. So we're going to get there. And I don't know if it'll take 5, 10, or 20 years, but we will get to the Planck length in our technology. So here's another aspect of the Planck length being the smallest distance possible. There's no zero where we are now. There's no zero here where we live. There is a space between the Planck length and zero. The Planck length is the edge of space-time. The edge effect is when you step over that, you step into faster than light world. Energy wavelengths at or below the Planck length are unbounded by the geometry of space-time, meaning that Einstein's law that nothing can go faster than the speed of light does not apply. The key in this, a very key thing, is that local reality is false. Part of why we know that God is creating everything, and what I've said so far is true, is that it was recently found by 3 theoretical physicists who were jointly awarded the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics for showing that the local realism view of the universe is likely to be false, which means there's nothing is there until you look at it. And this aspect of reality is theoretically explained by the superforce creating all reality and containing consciousness, you having a subconscious that you don't have conscious control of, and the superforce actually creating everything, a high-frequency gravity wave faster than light standing wave. So my theory fits the facts that nothing is there until you look at it, because consciousness and the creation of all matter are merged in this one standing wave. Now, how is consciousness merged with the standing wave? What I say is that your eye is blinking on and off at the exact same rate as matter itself, because matter itself is being generated by a wave, and so is your consciousness, and it's a transmission. It has wavelengths. It goes up and down, and when it's up, you're here, and when it's down, you're not here, or something like that. There's a universal observer in all beings, and your eye is part of the mechanism that sees what you subconsciously create right after you subconsciously create it. And so it's synced in and it vibrates, the eye vibrates synchronistically with everything that's out there. In other words, the eye and everything out there are blinking on and off trillions of times a second, and they're perfectly synced with each other. And so you're not aware of the vibration. There's no vibration that you're not actually already part of. And you and I are one subconsciously. In other words, subconsciously, we all share the same subconscious. Our identities are sitting on top of that subconscious. But when you get down, all living things share a subconscious. And all of us are one with the earth, because the earth itself is blinking on and off in conjunction with our eye, trillions and trillions and trillions of times a second. It's actually how it works, is that consciousness is creating us and this entire universe trillions and trillions of times a second. Now, if you were to somehow break free of this phase-locked wave, I mean, right now we're all synced in really good. We're synced, we're locked in. It's frictionless in all dimensions if you break out of the standing wave with your consciousness. Since your perception has a beat and it's lined up with the beat of the world, you become frictionless in all dimensions, which means you might be able to turn invisible. You might become lighter than air. You might be able to move through solid matter with ease. Your body might become incredibly dense. You might be able to move through space and time with ease. So, does this sound like any people that you're aware of? Does to me. Yeah, the ancient people. Now, I look at this form of general relativity and I go, okay, Dr. Pais definitely dropped clues so that somebody like me would go, look at this. Our military is trying to seed American commerce with the greatest technological breakthrough of all time. The U.S. Navy releasing these three public patents with no royalties. It's incredible. Look at what they're doing. All this talk of innovation among our leaders. No one has the courage to place their bets and take their chances with this theory of corrected general relativity in the commercial mainstream world currently. Everybody thinks I'm nuts, or I surmise. The lack of courage demonstrated by our academic leaders parallels the lack of courage shown by our business leaders and political leaders. I am truly disappointed in some of the fellow humans I share this world with. Evil, greedy people are in charge. They are not interested in doing things for the public good. Yet, what this equation means is there's a new world for us around the corner if we can grow a pair and go for it. Because it's up to us. We have to go for it. So, maybe I've been persuasive, maybe not. I think Einstein solved the unified field theory, and this is it. And he hid it in plain sight. And I explain why and how. Knowledge is power. I say this physics represents a new world if we can grab it. It's a total game changer. There are commercial applications beyond imagining. A few are warp drive, anti-gravity, universal cheap energy, teleportation and replicators, invisibility, telepathic communication and control, shape-shifting, and magic. I mean, honestly, if you get control of this level of physics, it's incredible. Now, let me just bring this home. God creates everything. God and your subconscious combined, because your subconscious is God, basically. It creates everything. You have no conscious control over the true power of the subconscious mind. God does. In the end, God creates everything. But, and there's a big but, the universe is so big, God has staff. The universe is divided up into smaller pieces that are each created by the minds of advanced creatures. Our section of the universe is created by the elliptilicum, the people before, the ancestors, the ancient people. We are living inside the subconscious creation of the ancestors. That is this place we live. Our world is inside the minds of the ancestors. I know you're going to have a hard time with that. Here's where you're really going to have a hard time with my theory. This is my theory in a nutshell. The ancestors are Bigfoot. What you may call Bigfoot are the ancestors, visible to us within this world which they have created in the first place. They are visiting the world they created in their minds. The little people are the ancestors as well, also known as the ancient people and the animal people, and the people before, elliptilicum. That's clickitat, or one-time clickitat for the people before. To coin a name, the Universal Sasquatch Collective, Little People Collective, ancestors create the world we live in their minds. We live in their moment-by-moment creation inside their shared mind, which is also our subconscious, the elliptilicum. I advise all people to respect and understand what you are seeing with your heart and mind. Thank you.